The story of Noah's Ark and the flood does not end with the landing on Mount Ararat. Noah's subsequent sacrifices on the altar he constructs and the appearance of a rainbow, symbolizing God's promise that never again will he destroy the entire earth in such a fashion. God blesses Noah and his family and urges them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Here at least the information given makes that possible because Noah and his sons have wives, unlike in the Adam and Eve account where only 3 sons are mentioned and where they find women to marry, and how they find women to marry is never explained. The account goes on to tell us a bit more about Noah's sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, as well as a bit more about the all-too-human side of Noah. Apparently Noah was a farmer and the first man to plant a vineyard. Well, grapes are not just for eating. So Noah makes some wine and drinks too much of it. He gets drunk. Falling down drunk and naked. Ham finds him in such a condition and tells his brothers. It's the brothers who cover Noah up. When Noah awakens, he gets very angry with Ham because of what he has done to him. What had Ham done to him? Instead of covering him up like Ham's brothers did, Ham went out to spread the tale of Noah's actions and to Noah's embarrassment. Doesn't that show the different kinds of attitudes people have to other people's failures? One is a cruel and crude impulse that snickers and sneers at another's weakness while gossiping about it, perhaps in an attempt to convince others and ourselves that he or she is no better than we are, and thus raise ourselves up in comparison. In contrast to Ham, Shem and Japheth covered Noah to prevent others from seeing his failure, and perhaps to be able to pretend that they had not seen it either. They were like those who, realizing their own human weaknesses, sympathize with the human weaknesses of others and try to help. Let me point out here again that the authors of all these stories looked at their world, saw it in all its reality, and tried to explain it, the good as well as the bad. And they did not pull their punches. Even this great hero Noah, one of the few that God found worthy of salvation, was not perfect, nor was at least one of his sons. They were great, yes, but anything but perfect. Through these stories, the authors attempted to understand and articulate what they found all around them and the reasons for it. And they did so not with science, but with literature. Interestingly, in their attempts, they also showed themselves to be very human and imperfect. Well, Noah wakes up and, we are now told, realizes what Ham has done and not done. He gets furious and curses Ham. Sounds like a fairly extreme reaction, don't you think? And after all, he was the one who got drunk. But let's hear what he says and then consider the reasons for it. Noah tells Ham that he and his descendants will be cursed and that they will be slaves to his brothers and their descendants. The account then goes on to name the peoples that are founded by the 3 brothers. And that's where we get a clue, because one of Ham's descendants is named Canaan. Do you have an idea where this might be leading? Throughout history, the Hebrews and the Canaanites, the ancestors of the Palestinians, have been enemies. It was from the Canaanites that the Hebrews took the land that comprised their nation after their escape from Egyptian slavery. So what better way to explain the defeat of the Canaanites and their subsequent subjugation and justify it than by making them the bad guys who deserved what they got right from the beginning? How fascinating to realize that the situation is, in a sense, right back where it started from. Just look at the Middle East today. Also, how ironic that such an example of race prejudice has for much of history been reversed, and the Jews have been on the receiving end, like in Nazi Germany and Tsarist Russia, and pretty much all over the world. This account, which came into being long after the Exodus, told the Hebrew story from the Hebrew perspective, reflected the hatred the Hebrews and the Canaanites felt for one another, gave a reason for such hatred and prejudice while trying to justify it, although hatred and prejudice can never be adequately justified, and demonstrated a striving to express their own feelings of superiority, which is invariably a part of prejudice. Again, an attempt to understand and explain the world as it is, but not to one's own detriment. As an aside, let me mention that American slavery was often justified by using the Bible. Pointed out by black apologists was Paul's apparent acceptance and condoning of slavery, including sending Onesimus, an escaped slave, back to Philemon, his legal master. To be sure, Paul asked for leniency, but sent him back nonetheless. And used even more vigorously by slave owners and slavers in general was the Ham and Noah episode. They believed that black people were the descendants of Ham through one of his descendants, Cush. And after all, didn't Noah cause Ham to curse Ham and say that he and his descendants would be slaves to Ham's brothers and their descendants, which would be everybody else? How easily we have used the scriptures to condone and justify horrible thoughts and deeds. So that leads us to the Tower of Babel. What was that all about? The tale tells us that the descendants of Noah and his sons began to multiply and eventually populated the entire earth. Of course, being related, they all initially communicated in the same tongue. But the authors of Genesis noticed that different people speak different languages, sometimes very different languages. How would one explain that? Here is their literary answer. The people, still relatively small in number, migrate from the east to the west until they come to Shinar, identified as Babylonia, where they settle. The inspiration for the account probably came from the presence of a ziggurat or tower, which was either never completely finished or stood in ruins. That, combined with the multiplicity of languages spoken all over the area, for them, the world, gave rise to the story. A story which was already told by locals before the Hebrews got hold of it and put their God in to make it religiously relevant. So, these people decide to build a city and a tower, the tower to rise into the very heavens in order to make a name for themselves and have a place around which to find stability and thus ultimately not be scattered. God looks down, heaven is always up, sees their efforts and determines to put a stop to it. Why? He tells us with the following. Look, they are one people and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Really? Can we imagine that the God who is credited with creating the entire universe would worry about these puny beings building a building high enough that it would somehow threaten him, or that with some degree of success they could seriously challenge him with even greater enterprises? It is also obvious that the authors had no idea regarding the realities of astronomy, where heaven was, or the limits of architecture, if they seriously thought that any building could possibly go that high. But again, it is a story, so let's treat it as such. In any case, in the account, God destroys their plans by suddenly making them speak different languages so that they can no longer understand one another. And of course, if they cannot understand one another, they cannot work together on their project. Their work is thus finished, and in confusion, they are scattered over the earth. Hence the reality of different people speaking different languages and living in different countries. Simple, straightforward, but too often here we tend to concentrate on the thoughts and actions of God and therefore miss the real meaning of the tale. For you see, the story of the Tower of Babel is much more about the people and the human tendency toward pride. The early Hebrews, like all peoples, had questions. Questions about how the world was formed, how the heavens were made, and most important, everything about humanity. Along with these and other questions, they wondered why there were so many languages. Their story answer was the one we are dealing with this morning. A naive answer, because language differences did not come into being as an immediate divine rebuke, but rather after long periods of time as various groups of the human race went through the separate phases of existence. However, back of this ancient story, there is a profound insight. The authors, you see, recognize that human differences, including language, are a source of great trouble leading to and caused by division and strangeness, suspicion, and hostility. And this is linked to an overweening human spirit by which people try to make themselves bigger than they are, the result of pride. There has never been a time when humanity has not thought that by its own devices it could accomplish anything and sit triumphantly at the very pinnacle of importance. The Egyptians thought they could do it with their pyramids, as did similarly the Mayans and the Aztecs and the Incas and the Babylonians. The Romans thought they could do it through architectural wonders and military conquest. The Greeks thought they could do it by taking the mind to new heights and eventually learn everything there was to learn. And countless nations have thought they could do it with great armies and navies that sought to create, and succeeded for a time, empires that dominated large portions of the world. So what is the result? Nothing lasts forever or attains everything. So perhaps there is not that much difference between the experience of the Egyptians and the Mayans and the Aztecs and the Incas and the Babylonians and the Romans and the Greeks and the Mongolians and the Moors and the English and the French and the Spaniards and the Germans and the Russians and the Chinese, and yes, we Americans and the builders of the Tower of Babel. Pride. Early 19th century English romantic poet Percy Bysshe Shelley dealt with this topic when he gave us Ozymandias. He wrote, "I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 'Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed, and on the pedestal these words appear, My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair.' Nothing remains beside. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." That kind of says it all, don't you think? To put the message of this story as simply and succinctly as possible, it is, don't get too big for your britches, and a subsequent message might be, don't bite off more than you can chew. The human spirit is always questing, seeking to do more and more, better and better, and that is good. But we must never get to the point where we think we can do and should do everything, or that we are the only ones who can do it because we are so much better than everyone else. In that direction lies disaster. Also, the more and more, better and better that we do or attempt to do should be for the welfare of humanity, all of humanity, and not just for our benefit. Perhaps that is the only way to build legacies that will really last forever. We have been talking about the Bible, raising questions with these stories. Well, questions raised about details of and within the stories will only be raised if we take the stories literally. If we realize that they are literary offerings to present lessons, we will accept them as such and not question that which cannot be possible in a real world. After all, they are stories. Stories articulating great truths. And it is these great truths that we should be concentrating upon. What lessons have you learned from the story of the Tower of Babel? And what difference can it make in your life?